coming on. I appreciate it. How you doing today?
Well, Luke, how are you?
Yeah, doing okay. Doing okay for a Sydney Monday.
It is, yeah, back into the working week. I think, as I said before we started, I've been doing a lot of writing this morning, and that's the morning just went. You know,
Yep.
incredible. I was in the zone, so I was enjoying that.
How many hours did you write for?
It was only I don't know, around 7:30, 8 o'clock, so a couple of hours, yeah, 2 or 3 hours. Yeah, it seemed to go in about 10 minutes. So I know when that happens that I'm in my element, enjoying myself when it goes that quick.
Yep. Well, that's unheard of for my generation. We don't spend more than a few hours doing anything.
Oh, there
It
you go.
seems that and I think it's just natural habits now. You get up your phone, you start scrolling, and then
Yeah,
you get in this bad pattern of bad attention.
yeah,
So just to write for a few hours, that's incredible.
yeah. It was all about a whole bunch of questions I asked myself, but I thought others might want to know the answers to. It's for some video content, for social media,
Hmm.
and I know I'm supposed to keep it short because of that short attention span. Um, but hard to get a whole bunch of experience into 20 seconds, I tell you. But it's worth a try.
And for those listening, can you tell us who you are and what you do and all that nice stuff?
Oh, sure. My experience far outweighs my academic credentials, or uh, I've been in the business of being present to people for well over 25 years or so. Initially on crisis lines for suicide intervention and for loss and grief. So I spent many years doing that. And then, of course, I do have like diplomas and certificates, and I do lots of APD each year to keep my credentials up or my licensing. Um, but yeah, my clients are by far the greatest teachers, and I get the most out of that. So in the world of uh, degrees, it's all in the wisdom that I've got from the clients and the sessions and the hours I've done that. So whenever I actually have any self doubt or question my abilities, I try to practice remembering that I've been taught by the greatest, which is all the clients and the hours and the sessions I've been through over the last 25 years or so. That's pretty much me. I have a practice now where I work out of a couple of locations on the Central Coast, New South Wales, and also have video conference and telehealth calls from clients around the country. And that keeps me off the streets for a few days a week, and that sort of fits me at this time of my life. So it's going well. Yeah.
And what have you learnt from speaking to people for 20 years? Obviously there's a whole bunch of things about human nature, but what are some of the key things that you've taken away?
Um, the incredible resilience of human beings. You can imagine what I've heard, uh, and you can imagine the pain that I've been present to, and the way that people are able to survive that and survive that well, and in most cases turn that into positives in their lives. It's just I'm always in awe of that. I've had my own struggles and my own suffering, but um, I've listened to a lot of suffering, and I'm just constantly amazed at how people can survive that and recover so well. Um, so yeah, I'm just constantly in awe of the fortitude of human beings. It's incredible.
Beautiful. And so that's 20 years doing Lifeline, speaking to people on the phone mainly.
Yeah,
Is that what it is? Okay, cool, cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's pretty incredible. I mean, I couldn't imagine having 20 years experience. Was that full time, was it?
It was a couple of shifts a week at first, and because they like to have you do one or two shifts a week just for a year or two. I think that's the initial commitment, if you like. But
Hmm.
because I'm always in the habit of saying yes, I then became a supervisor and a trainer,
Hmm.
and then a supervisor of the supervisors. So I just kept sort of stepping my way up in that particular organisation.
Hmm.
Um, and then they opened up their online chat and SMS and face
Hmm.
to face arms, if you like. And then I was involved in that and became
Yeah.
more face to face therapy, if you like. with the community that they offer for free, which is still amazing. And it's subsidised by the government for very good reason, because of the epidemic we have around people doing their best to manage their mental health in Australia.
Yep.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Give me 2 seconds, John. Hang on.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry about that. Just some background noise.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've always wondered, like working from a place like that where you're hearing, I guess, for lack of better words, the darkest parts of humanity, the darkest parts of people. You see that the very end degree of someone's despair, and it
Yeah,
must teach you a lot about humanity, because on the spectrums, on the ends, you have the most beautiful, profound experiences of life, and that defines and shapes you as a person. Then you have the other side as well, which is that really dark period, I think, which we've all gone through, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, people a lot wiser and more important than me have made some very qualified statements over the year around um, the human nature and the dark side and the light side and what we're capable of, but also the resilience of human beings and how they've been able to evolve in such tremendously hard experiences and times in their lives. So, yeah, and on the phones, the main thing on the phones was you had to be sort of hyper vigilant, because you didn't have any body language, you didn't have any faces to look at, or be present to that extreme pain, as you said, because a lot of people who were in the business of wanting to die, and to be ever vigilant to the tone of voice and the pace and the silences. It sort of it refines your listening skills, if you like. I think pretty much every person who puts their hand up to be a helping person in the therapist trade should probably spend some time on the phone, just to refine that. I think would be good for them and for the people that are searching for help. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I just finished reading a book on World War One, and it's about a 600-page, 700-page book. All the intricate details from how it started with the Austrian prince, all the way to the end of when there was the armistice and all those things, and just like some of the stuff people have been through and the things that we inflict on each other is incredible. Like there's a war front, Verdun, in France at 1916, and that was one of the worst ones. And from memory, I think it's 1.5 million people, right? So let's not talk about Germans or French or English or, the small portion of Australians or New Zealanders that were there. Let's talk about people, right? Over 1 million people died on that front
Yeah.
for a couple of inches, not inches, it's a couple of miles to be fair, or kilometers in Australian or UK. And people died for that, right? And some of the things they went through, they had water up to their waist, got trench foot. You stick your head above the parapet, you get shot straight away. Like it's these bombs going off, and there wasn't any like this is the hard part for me to wrap my head around. It's like, okay, well, how can one survive in that environment? It's like, well, you can do all these things here to survive. At the end of the day, there's no certainty, because you could have a bomb that goes off right there. There's no skill set that allows you to, obviously, you're good with a gun and whatnot. There's no skill set to keep you alive. So basically, you're increasing the chances of death by going even to the front there. And if you didn't go, you were in a way shamed by people. If you're a pacifist, you were shamed. And then also on top of that as well, if you went to the front and you backed out, you would then be shot as an example, right? And the reason I'm bringing this up reminds me of Carl Jung talking about the roots growing deep into the earth, right? Like the darkness of humanity growing deep into the earth that then pushes the branches up to make it reach further closer to the sun.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible what humans do to each other. And I always wonder, is that just a part of who we are, or is it something that we need to work on releasing? There's so much to it. And it's like, if we keep repeating the same pattern, like you look at China and America now, and the West versus the autocracies versus democracies, as it always is. Like, when will we stop? When will we learn the lesson?
Yeah. Well, firstly, the statistics around those deaths of so many thousands of people per minute during that time in those wars was just incredible. It was like stadiums full of people, a day or a week that were just dying. And those people, as you say, you put your head up and you're gone. They also connected with their buddies. They were like families that they were with on those
Yeah.
crusades. So they had
Yep.
families at home, but then they become incredibly close to these other
Here's
soldiers.
the
Yeah, that they
here's the death toll. Just
oh,
quickly, like, look at this.
yeah,
So the total military 14 million.
yeah, that's incredible. I know, and
Yeah, well,
that's
15. That's crazy.
yeah, and that's man's inhumanity to man, right? Where the amount
Yeah.
of the amount that human beings have put human beings through, and the amount of pain that human beings have suffered. But to your second point, it's around that. It's philosophical, right? And that is, what's the point? What's the meaning behind this? Are we part of an evolutionary process? And are we learning? Are we getting better for it? Is the light side winning, or are we going to just be um, destined to relive the past and go over the same things and not learn from them? Generations, a couple of generations forget. You and I will be forgotten in a few generations. No one's going to remember us. So will they remember the lessons of war? I don't know. We don't know. We can only speculate. I would like to think that we're heading towards love more than not. I'd like to think that I think we're, even though with all the stuff that's happening at the moment, I'd like to read that we're killing less of ourselves now than we always have,
We are.
in history, and that people's spiritual connection to each other and to their beliefs is getting stronger, that compassion is winning over hate. Um, I like to read those things, but then, of course, you also have to watch all of the atrocities and the hate online and the divisions, in America, and the fear around wars and nuclear wars with Russia and China and America. Um, so yeah, we're still somewhat vulnerable to being killed today, still from that. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the talk around the feminine movement and the masculine manosphere kind of movement at the moment, I think we forget to realize, and perhaps this is the breaking point of it all, which is that people have done bad things to people. It's like men have done bad things to women, women have done bad things to men have done bad things to men, and women have done bad things to women. Like
Yeah.
and it feels like that there's if you want to go down this path, we certainly can. But like, and again, back to Carl Jung, he talks about the dark side of people, and
Mm.
that one needs to embrace the darkness to bring it into light, and that brings about individuation. It's like, yeah, but the journey to that is so tough. It's because we all have anger inside of us. We all have rage. We all have, all parts of humanity. Unless you're a very unique individual that might not possess those things, we all have. And I don't think there is that kind of person, but let's just pretend there is, right? But
Mm.
we'll have that part of us, and I think that's coming back to 20 plus years experience and speaking to these people, like when you have no one to turn to and like you have nowhere to go at that point, it's like, I need to call someone. There's a lot of
Mm.
people like that during the pandemic. And I knew a few of them personally.
Mm.
When you lose meaning, you lose human connection, you lose touch with what it means to be human in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And firstly, talking about that dark side, I've often, whenever I hear people being angry at other people for what they believe are making bad decisions, the way I look at that is that we are all capable of the worst things that human beings can do to other human beings. It's God's grace go I, if you like, and that is if we were born at the same time in the same place with the same experiences, we could all be murderers and rapists and Hitlers.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Hmm.
we could also be Mother Teresa's and Gandhi's. So we all have that propensity based
Hmm.
on our environment, notwithstanding some chemical imbalance. If you have, there's some stuff that can happen in our biology um, that can send us into psychotic behavior. But generally, the nature nurture thing, most of us are built up from what we've experienced. So
Mm.
knowing that everyone on earth is my brother and sister, and knowing that everyone on earth including myself, has the propensity to be Gandhi or Hitler. I just go with knowing it helps, and appreciating that I'm closer to Gandhi than Hitler, in my experience at my time on Earth, geographically where I was born. I want to appreciate the hell out of that. That's what I do.
Mm.
That helps me. And what was your second point? Sorry, I was around being present to people's pain recently. Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying, during the pandemic, there was a lot of people who were going through that situation. I had people personally
Yeah,
close to me who, called those lines or got very close to it.
yeah,
And almost the symbol for that is like, this is really bad. It's so bad that I need to call a stranger,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And I don't want to use those wordings, that kind of wording, but call someone for help.
yeah. Well, people need people. Connection is so important. And I think there's been shifts around social interactions, over the last couple of generations around people spending time with people in nuclear families and having 3 generations in the same home and having smaller towns where everyone was the parent to the children, that sort of thing. We've become more isolated and more um, less connected, so that when those challenging times come, there's
Mm,
less resources around us. And also some sort of a belief that's been hammered in at some point that you should be able to sort your own problems out on your own. That creates very lonely people that are suffering, that are
mm,
craving for connection. And as you say, if it's not there, if your friend isn't there, if your mum's not there, if
mm,
your unconditionally loving auntie's not available, then yeah, you pick up the phone and you call someone who knows how to listen, who knows how to care.
mhm.
Yeah, it's like a last resort.
Yeah. Well, my theory is that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. My theory is that most of mental health problems, I'd say 99% of them, and this is just theory, comes from our detachment from what is natural to us.
Mm,
By natural, I mean specifically, let's say, for example, it's a very contentious one, but hunter gatherer style of living, right?
yeah,
And if you look at animals who are placed into captivity, like into zoos, they experience something called zoochosis.
yeah.
And zoochosis is the symptoms of,
That
uh,
rocking, they're rocking and stuff, isn't it?
yeah, so
Yeah,
like
yeah,
rocking, self mutilation, biting their skin, all types of things like this that you see in humans as well.
yeah,
And the reason they're experiencing that is because they're taken out of their natural environment and put into a zoo.
yeah,
So I wonder how much we've put ourselves into a zoo. We
mm,
think this is how we're supposed to live and we're used to it, but something just doesn't quite feel right. There's
yeah,
that itch that isn't scratched. And what is that? And
mm,
it's like, well, I need to get on medication, I need to do this. I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just making an observation.
mm,
Then we think we need to do this or that. And we start doing things, we start creating systems around bandages as opposed to looking at the root cause,
mm,
first principles thinking, right? So that's my theory, is that to a degree we're living in a level of zoochosis, and that our primal nature, being that of, that, if you're angry, for example, you might go hunting, or
mm,
you might uh, go for a run, like you might just sprint through nature. And we can do that now, of course. I'm not saying you
mm,
can't.
mm.
I'm just saying it's that was the access. Or, like let's say, for example, you had a rough day. You didn't catch the thing that you wanted to catch where it might be. And
Yeah,
the nighttime, you sit around the campfire, or the fire, I should say, not camp, because you wouldn't be camping. It's just fire.
mm,
And you're sitting there, and then, you're maybe laughing with your friends, you're hugging, you got the human touch, your feet. If you're in a, more climatic appropriate environment, your
ground,
feet are on the
ground.
ground.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have the orange, the red rays of light coming from the fire.
yeah.
And it feels like, what doesn't feel like we have lost that in modern civilization.
Mm. Well, we're probably if we're I know we're all in a transition, and we're all part of evolution. If we look back at this period, a couple hundred years from now, so um, but you're right. I feel like we're in a pretty elevated transition at the moment between who we were and who we weren't, and with technology and the first industrialized industrialization and then technology, we've gone through some major changes in a couple of generations, and trying to keep up with that as human beings is not easy. So there's really no mystery as to why we have so much unsettledness, troubled mental health concerns. It all makes sense, really. What I'm hoping for is that the pendulum will swing back towards what is still humanly natural, and that is to connect and care and with compassion and love and community. That seems to be where it's the stuff that people are noticing. There's a Dr. Wayne Dyer and Eckhart Tolle. There's a couple of people that I've read a fair bit of, and they talk about us losing the now, and if we're unsettled or we're not feeling or we're stressed, then we've sort of lost the now, and we've lost that groundedness and that mindfulness around what's happening right now, spending a lot of time in the past or the future. But once again, because I'm a great advocate for human resilience, I see us coming through well. That's what I'd like to think anyway. Yeah.
Do you feel that the Eckhart Tolle route of being present to the moment is actually a bit of a spiritual bypass sometimes?
I don't know. With meditation and with mindfulness, which are the sort of, a lot of people, those words seem to come out a lot of mouths at the moment. It's about, for me, it's probably more about our minds and the ability for our minds to create unnecessary suffering. So if you spend a lot of time worried about the future, you're missing out on today. If you spend a lot of time agonizing over the past, you're sort of missing out on today. So if you can be a witness to that and be aware of that and practice some strategies to bring yourself back into the now, to connect with the ground and connect with nature and connect with yourself, and to use all your senses to notice the now, it works. It clears your mind. It gives you more clarity in making decisions and enjoying your time here, however long that is. Yeah. So yeah, I think that sort of works for me, and that's what I got from his writings, both Eckhart Tolle, definitely.
Beautiful. Just give me 10 seconds. Hang on.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Right, communicating your frustrations.
I'm glad you picked up on that.
Yeah.
I just had someone in the background making lots of noise when I asked them not to. So
there you go, and that triggers your inconsiderate button. Oh no.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask. I want to take a bit of a direction. So for me, I'm 28 years old, right? And for anyone out there, most of my audience, frankly, would be around the same age as me, if not, in their 30s. Is there something that you, as someone who has lived more life, would know more about us that we should know? Like, if you could tell. Now, obviously, in that question, there's a flaw, which is, well, you're 28 years old, you're not going to listen anyway, or something like that.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear, with your experience, because you've dealt with so many people and you've had lots of different, calls with different people, and you've lived a life that people haven't lived yet. What advice or, what ways of seeing the world would you inherit on someone who might not be ready to who's not that age yet, I should say?
Well, firstly, generally compared to your generation, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. And I have 5 children and a couple of children around your age.
Mhm.
and they taught me. Usually in their teenage years, each one of them taught me that I'm never in the business of telling them what to do, and and it was on purpose and for good reason, and that was my experience from my lifetime does not vaguely resemble theirs, and who they and the mistakes that they make are integral to their growth. So I learnt pretty early on from my children, 5 of them, and from my ex-wife and my current wife, that giving advice or bestowing wisdom um, doesn't work. Uh, what works,
Interesting.
is actually trusting them 100% in their journey, and trusting it so much to be in awe of it. And that is as they make their decisions, even if I disagree with them, even if the closest I could ever come would be, if I was you, I would do this or I wouldn't do that. And the only time I'd ever impart that is if I was asked directly, what do you think I should do? And my answer would be, well, I can't tell you what to do because I'm not you. But what I would do if I was in your situation, remembering that I'm not your age and I'm not having the same situation. So the closest I can get to imparting that wisdom is, if I were you and I was that age, this is what I would do. Um, but by far, whatever you do, I trust completely, because you'll either be happy and successful with whatever that is, or you'll learn from it. You'll become wiser from it. And I certainly don't want to get in the way of that. I just rather watch that with awe. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and it comes through in your communication. So we do a bit of work together, right? I'm doing the content for you,
Mm,
and the communication from your side is a letting go of like, hey, I trust you.
mm,
And that's an interesting feeling, because when it comes to controlling, right, people want to control an outcome.
yeah,
um we all do to a degree, we're all like that to a degree. But I think, my experience and my feeling that I get, the felt sense that I have from you is like, this person trusts me, so I'm going to do the right thing no matter what.
yeah,
Now for me, from my moral point of view, and I sometimes think that being moral can actually hinder you, but for me as a person, I always want to do the right thing, no matter what. Doesn't matter how the person treats me. But well, to a degree, but you get my point, right?
yeah,
But the feeling that I get from my experience with you is that there's a lot of trust there. So, maybe 9 times out of 10, there's things you just can't control, which is fair enough. Life happens, but hey, I trust you.
mm,
And that puts this responsibility on me in a good way. Like, firstly, that this person trusts me, I
mm,
can let go.
mm,
But also at the same time, I want to do the right thing because they're giving me the opportunity.
mm,
And I think that's a huge lesson. And that's something that I want to learn myself, because I'm managing a team of 7 people at the moment. And it's so hard because the thing is, the initial trusting opens the door for uncertainty, and uncertainty can lead to the results that you don't want.
yeah,
But over time, people naturally come into full swing, but you need to trust them. So that's the hard part. So I see the utility of that,
yeah.
but I also can have compassion for the hardship of letting go of that as well.
Yeah, well, the key, I think, for me was to not only trust their journey, but to trust my own. So,
Wow.
so with you, I trust you know more about your industry than I do. One thing I worked out really early, and I have another skill set because I also created and grew and sold businesses over my lifetime. That was the other thing I do. And some of those businesses were quite large businesses with hundreds of employees. So what worked for me in the end was to trust each individual who's doing the best they can. You give them a guideline, a very clear guideline of expectations. You allow for their autonomy to add value to those guidelines, but the guidelines need to be very clear.
Mm,
So if you have a particular job description that has a very clear guideline that you have an expectation to, writing that down in absolute detail from beginning to end. It used to be called turnkey. Well, if you wrote down your expectation from the person that sits in that chair, from beginning to end, and then make it a living document that they can and you can contribute to. You have that base, and people feel safe when they know the rules. So if they don't fulfill part of that obligation, it's clear to everyone immediately, you and them, and you can have that conversation around that either not happening again or happening in a more positive way. And you can, and then the next time something happens, once again, there's no ambiguity, there's no grey around it. They say, oh, you agreed to do that, you didn't do that. And they go, yeah, I got that. So I think it would be better if it was done this way. So having that open, honest, but clear and structured agreement that is open-ended to improvement is how I worked with employees and contractors. It had to be written down. It was just that simple for me, so that we all knew we're on the same page. But having said that, each one of those individuals have their own journeys. So if it becomes clear that it's not a good match, then we both know that, and we can both have those conversations, and we can both go on our way. So that is a great opportunity to have with all of your employees and contractors, and that is to have that agreement very clear and to communicate that at every instance. There you go. There's my business side. Okay.
Yeah.
On the other side, trusting my journey and your journey, and that is that if you have skills I don't have, so I trust that you will impart those skills under our agreement. If you fail miserably in that process, I trust that too, because I know that you'll learn from that, and I'll learn from that, and we'll make a decision on whether you and I work together going forward if it's a good fit, and also you will be better for having failed on purpose in that endeavour. So I trust that too. What's really sad is that I've had a lot of agreements or arrangements or relationships with the employees and contractors that have failed miserably, but have learnt and received the wisdom from that, and then gone on to impart that with others. But I missed out on that. I missed out on the benefit of that. But I trust that too. So yes, I trust you. I trust your journey. I trust that you'll be successful, or if you fail, that you'll learn from that success and be better for it. Because that's what I notice human beings do. They do.
So it's a trust in your journey and existential trust in just what's going to happen, because ultimately, like, I mean, I don't know if I believe this entirely, but let's just throw it out there. It's like what's going to happen is going to happen. Like you can't bend reality to your will. It's like the concept of lying. It's like, sure, you can lie, but you can't bend reality. It always comes full circle, right?
Yeah.
And then going back to what you said at the start, so your first step always with employees, and I'm very interested in this for my own selfish reasons, is like you have guidelines, right? And
Very
saying
clear.
this is the guide. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Very clear guidelines. And then second to that, you have, hey, these are the guidelines. It's open to recommendations, but I would like the result to look like X, or I'd like the result to look like Y.
Yeah.
Or if it's something.
By this time, and that result.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Time result. And then what is your process for discerning? And this could be a part of your own private practice as well. It could be anything in life, relationships, you name it.
Yeah.
What is your approach to when things aren't working out? Is it like a 3-strike thing? Do you communicate that's a 3-strike thing? What do you do? And you can use any example. You can use an interrelationship if you like, but just generally speaking.
That's the boundaries comes to mind, and that is that there's limitations to everyone's participation in a relationship. So when it's very clear about who I am and what I'm willing to contribute and my expectations, and it's clear around yours, it'll become very clear to both of us with consistent communication. So it's not about the 3 strikes you're out. It's about communicating every time it happens. If by legislation you need 3 documented meetings of what happened and what we're going to do to manage that, you can certainly do that. But regardless of that, just having those communications, document them so that you can tick the boxes, but just having those communications each time, it'll become apparent to both people that the relationship isn't fitting, and that both people are trusting that it looks like it has a natural end to that for now. You may re-intersect years later. So it's just about, for now, we don't fit, and these are the reasons. And is there anything you disagree with around that? Considering my expectations and what you've been willing to put forward. And of course, you have all of those skills around maintaining people's self-esteem. It's not a bullying process. It's about respecting them and who they are and where they're at. You don't ever talk down to them or criticise them. You just recognise them for who they are and respect them for where they're at. Yeah.
Can you define the difference between respecting someone and bullying someone? Because I hear that, but it's nice to know the exact definition of what that is.
Well, one is that where you don't have mutual respect. You don't respect them as an independently operating human being that are not wrong. They're just different. So if you think, or you believe, or you have a belief that the way to get the best out of another human being is to admonish them or criticize them or belittle them, there was a time in history where that was a short-term solution. That is not the case anymore. No, you have to have respectful relationship with human beings now. So there's no admonishing them, criticizing them, having a go at them personally, talking down to them, belittling them. No, there's no value in any of that for either you or them. And businesses, I've noticed, are getting that, I think, more and more these days, especially small and medium businesses. Corporate dragging the chain, I think. But yeah, which is actually counterintuitive to what most people think at the moment, is that corporates seem to have all of their HR in place, and small and medium businesses run the risk of affecting people's mental health. I'm noticing the opposite. I'm noticing that small and medium businesses have to have these relationships and have to have these open communications for those things to work, whereas corporate can get away with it for years without knowing that they're destroying someone's self-esteem in the background. Yeah. Maybe I've just had I might have had a skewed number of clients in that area. Yeah. I don't have enough sample size to say that's true. Just feels that way. Yeah.
I hear you. And what would you say about those leaders in most recent history who have been employees have said they're abrupt, rude, arrogant, like the Elon Musks or the Steve Jobs or the James Camerons of the world, who are just they know what they want, they know how to get it, but in the process of doing that, they are perhaps nasty to their employees. They have a level of insight that most people might not have.
Yeah.
What about them? What about people like that who are building some of the biggest and best products, movies, things out there, and they're doing the exact opposite of what you're saying? Of course, there's always exceptions, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, if there are any.
It's the way I said it's almost like domestic violence cycle, and that is that you have someone who wants to control and needs control, which is fundamentally because of a tremendously deep fear of not having control. And then you have a whole bunch of people saying yes. In order for someone to have control, someone has to give up their control. So each one of those individuals that are used to finding safety in being acquiescing to others' needs.
Agreeable.
Yeah, they'll keep saying yes, but it's not sustainable. I think it slowly destroys them from the inside out, and eventually they do hopefully find a space where they get their power back. But in the meantime, the controllers have a whole bunch of controlees at their beck and call, and as long as people keep saying yes, they'll keep using them, and it'll be a revolving door. They'll bring in people that will just keep saying yes until they're exhausted, and then they'll leave, and a whole new set of people will come in saying yes until they're exhausted, and they'll leave. That's why I was talking about the corporate system.
Merry-go-round.
Yeah, that's it. So, but once again, I trust, again, because I'm Mr. Trust the process. I trust all of those individuals, including the controllers and those that give up their control. Is where they're at, and there's a reason, and that's where they are at. And if they don't like it, I'd like to think that they'd, when they're ready, if they're ready, they'll they'll seek a different way.
Mm.
And there'll be people out there and supports out there that will help them find it if they need that support. Yeah.
And is there a way to trust someone, but also push them?
Well, it's once again in a domestic violence situation. If you say you know a person in a relationship where someone's controlling and someone's being controlled, if all of the support structure are telling that person to get out of that relationship, that's no good for you. You're being treated atrociously. You need to get out of that. They're receiving the same message from you. You're telling them what to do, and every time you tell anyone what to do, the message they're receiving is that they don't know what they're doing. So once again, you just stand up next to their abuser by telling them what to do, just like their abuser does. So in both careers and also relationships, from my world, it's about trusting them again and them building their sense of self-worth. And if they, as most domestic violence survivors, statistics say that it's 7 or 9 times they leave a relationship before they actually leave it. There's no pushing them out. You trust their pace and you trust the timing around that, and the more you trust them that they are making conscious decisions to stay in an abusive environment, either a relationship or a job, the more you trust those decisions, the more they trust themselves, the more they make a decision one day that they are worth more than that they deserve better than that. That's the only real way to support someone who's in that type of environment. Yeah, makes sense?
Yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying. I think that coming back to the trust thing,
Yeah.
if you really break it down to its fundamental parts, let's say for example you enter a relationship with someone, and you first meet them, and there's the passionate love phase, and you're on that metaphorical cocaine high and whatnot, and then you come to the companionate phase where you start to grow like vines together, and you start to realize things you don't like about the person, and things like, hey, like maybe you do weekly meetings, or weekly, not meetings, but weekly catch ups or dates, or it might be, and you say, hey, like I didn't like on Tuesday night when you left the plate in the sink, all right, and then I didn't like this, and then what happens over time, you can say like, hey, that's that person, so that you trust that things will be okay.
Yep.
Hey, like I didn't like that very much. For me, it makes me feel XYZ. Here's the fact, you did this, makes me feel this way.
Yep.
What's your opinions on that? You share your story, so to speak. And then when that happens, you start to create kind of like a, in business terms, but let's just relate to relationships, some guidelines around how one is to grow like vines with one other person, because it's a long-term thing, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years,
Yeah.
And you start to learn about them. And then, along the way, like you're just saying, hey, look, it just takes time. It really just takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. But here's what I like. Here's what they like. Here's what we don't like. And you build like a so-called thesis of what you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. And you start to realize these things. And the trust part is that patience is necessary for those things to happen, because they're not going to change overnight. And in fact, things ought to change slowly over time, or they won't be really changing, because things go like this in the space of a day, but over time they're always like up and down, but all around, but so to speak, they're always going a certain direction.
Yeah.
So then relating that back to business, like if you hire someone and you're looking for a certain skill set and they're not reaching that skill set, it's like, okay, did they follow the guideline? Yes, they followed the guideline. Okay, I can be angry at them right now for not doing it how I want them to do it, but it's about letting go and saying, hey, so as a business owner, this is on me. Like I haven't trained them up enough, or perhaps any extra resources, perhaps I hired incorrectly. Now you start to realize these things, and I think that control thing is actually quite the opposite of it's what you said before. It's a lack of control. And the more control you try and garner over someone, and here's the thing, I always want to normalize it, because we all want control to a degree, right?
Sure.
But when we try and do that, we then betray trust, and then we actually do the opposite of that, which is we people want to act in defiance in a way. It's like, I'm going to be resentful.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, da-da. So I see the trust part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, once again, for me to stay sane in the world until I drop dead, I tend to stand right outside of most of that, um, to make sense of it, and that is to, once again, and we're overusing the word trust here, but once again, if you trust the journey of the individuals and you trust all of the relationships that they attract into their lives are an opportunity to learn more about self, um, then there is no wrong, there is no uh, there's no errors. It's all as required, and in those relationships, the beginning, middle, and end of those relationships, you are equally responsible for, both parties. So,
Mm,
in a business setting, that is, we came together, we had expectations, we communicated, we did it respectfully, and we decided that it was that'll do us for now, and we'll go off our own ways. And the same happens in intimate relationships. Um, Another element, only because I've been doing this too long, is the reason you're attracted to those people in the first place. You know, the chemical stuff.
mm,
Um, I noticed, once again, being taught by my clients, and from my own life, that the reason we're attracted, one of the reasons we're attracted to other human beings is that there's an opportunity to learn more about self. That's what I think the point is. Um, so
integration.
yeah, so that's it. So I'll pick someone who has some traits that feel like home. I'll pick someone who has some, either in the way they look or the way they act or the way they hold themselves, that feels like home. And you can't quite put your finger on it, but it's because there's parts of them that are a bit like mum or a bit like dad or a bit like Auntie Jane or Nana,
Wow.
from your family of origin, where it feels like home. That comfort attracts you to that. You then have, as you said, the honeymoon period. And if there were some unmet needs in your family of origin around love or attention or care, then you'll try to continue to get those needs met from the person that feels like home.
Hmm.
The problem with that is that those needs were unmet back in the foundation, or back in the early years. You can't have another human being's not going to fulfill those needs in your adult life, because the needs were unmet back in the foundation. So you'll spend all your time trying to have those needs met, and the person that you're trying to get it from will spend all their time saying, it doesn't matter what I do, it's never enough. Um,
Mm,
so and of course, the answer is always the same, and that is that the gift in those relationships is to love yourself more, to trust yourself more, to accept yourself more, to forgive yourself. Um, all of those relationships are the gifts that come from them. Is that
mm,
and the more you love, trust, accept, and forgive yourself, the more whole you become, and the more connected you feel to other human beings, with a unconditional love,
mm,
no expectation, just appreciation from the people
mm,
around you, including their differences.
mm.
So that's a mouthful. Sorry about that. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Okay.
It's because there's often, for the rigid types out there who are, perhaps more heady, there's, like, I want the exact answer. Like, is it three strikes? Is it like five? Is it 5.5? Tell me, John, exactly what needs to happen in the situation where I walk away.
Yeah.
But what that really is, it's a split between your intuition and your head. It's like you will know intuitively when the answer comes, and it's like trusting your
Yeah.
intuition and
Yeah.
saying to yourself, like, hey, my intuition is telling me this,
Yep.
which means I probably should look at that, right? When does one, if at all, not listen to their intuition? Because I know there is such things as, biases, availability heuristics, and things like that. When does one not trust their intuition, if at all, and why?
Well, that comes back to boundaries, which is also in your guidelines. So in the business world, having it very clear that when expectations aren't met, that there is a meeting and there is a conversation and there is a documented resolution. So that is in the agreement you have with the contractor or the employee to start with, and that is that we will meet at these intervals. I will come with my both my the things that I'm happy with and the things that I have concerns around. I'll bring both to those meetings, and I need you to bring the same. And then in that meeting, we will go through that with open and honest and mutually respectful conversation, where those concerns are brought up. But also with young children, you spend just as much time saying well done as, I think that could have been done better, or well done, but I noticed that, you didn't do that. You do the sandwich, right? And that is that, you're amazing, all of the wonderful things, but this might need a bit of work, right? And of course, as human beings, again, people will tell us 9 good things about us, and the one thing that might need some work, and that's all we concentrate on because of that fear that we're not good enough. Anyway, back to point. Writing it down, making it very clear, following the guidelines. Nothing better than saying, I have to follow the rules, regardless of how I feel. We have followed this, we've agreed to it, and here's the result. And we've had 3 conversations now where the solution hasn't been found. And as per our agreement, it's time to part ways. And you'll get people that will agree to that 100%. You'll get others that don't, but the ones that don't, you have a very clear guideline that they signed off on, and that they've participated in, and it has a natural end. Yeah.
Yeah. Clarity builds trust.
Yeah, that's it. And people feel safe in that. They like knowing when they're doing the right thing, and they also like knowing when they're not, and also for there to be a solution to that. So, yeah, just like young children, they want to be told, well done, just as often as, told, don't do that for your own health. I want to protect you. Yeah.
And at what point is clarity in how you really feel or objective truths relevant? Let's say, for example, someone's overweight. It's like, hey, you're fat. I know it sounds harsh,
All right.
but I'm just,
yeah.
I'm saying, like, when is it relevant to do that? Like, I feel like, especially my generation, and perhaps, there's some resentment there for me, but I feel like we are constantly told how amazing we are. We've become very soft. Our hands are moisturized. Like we have no hardship, and it feels like we need to get back to being clear with people about the reality of things.
So,
what do you think about that?
Everyone's a little bit over coddled. Is that what you're suggesting? They're a little bit getting too many. You came 13th, yay, in the race type stuff. Is that?
That's one example, but also mean like over mothered in a way. Like you have your parents who are supposed to bring you here into the world, which is, it's more than that. I'm just saying, keep it simple, right? But let's say, for example, I have, I got my mate Johnny, who he's put, excuse me, he's put on weight, and rather than saying to him, oh, it's gonna be okay, man, like, you just train, brother, like, it's gonna be okay. It's like, dude, you're fat. Like, at what point is that important? Because I hear the sandwich thing, right? I hear that a lot, but I just feel like there's not enough negative reinforcement anymore, right? We run away from what's negative and towards what's positive. It's like, hey, man, you're fat, but you can go to the gym and sort that out.
Yeah.
At what point is that relevant, if at all?
Well, once again, it's only advice should only be given if it's asked for directly, and then even only ever given based on what you would do if you're in their situation. That's
nice.
One way. And secondly, there's a pendulum that happens in just about everything in the world, and it's a self-correcting pendulum. So if we've gone into a period over a couple of generations where we had children that were seen and not heard, and we had children that were
nice
stuff, and we had people that were you had to follow the line, you had to get a job, you had to get married, you had to raise children, you had to own your house, you had to get the gold watch, and then you could go die peacefully knowing that you did that job well. You had a life well lived. And then all of those children who were pushed down into the ground with a thumb with their self-esteem say, I'm never doing that. If I ever have kids, I'm going to give them love and freedom and attention, and I'm going to be there for them 24 hours a day, and I'm going to protect them like I was unprotected and like I felt unsafe. And of course, any extreme behaviour will begot an extreme behaviour. So if you spend a lot of time protecting your children, They're, as you were suggesting, they're not going to learn how to protect themselves. If you keep making decisions for people, they're not going to trust their own decisions. They're going to be continually asking, what should I do? I'm too scared to make a decision because I've never made one. Mum and dad have always made them. I've always go to them going, oh, I don't know what to do. And because their parents have always been there to tell them what to do to protect them and keep them safe, unlike their childhood, that child then doesn't trust their own decision-making abilities. Um, so the pendulum may have swung a little bit too far, but once again, I trust that it'll swing back. Um, and and then your parents generally leave the earth before you do, and you'll have to make your own decisions. And you'll make mistakes, and you'll learn from the mistakes, and you'll trust yourself in that process. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, it's amazing how individual relationships can in fact impact culture, and then culture can also impact individual relationships. You look at what you're explaining right now. So my parents, they were the generation of like not being heard, not being taken care of. Like
mm,
for my family, that's certainly true in the past. And my granddad, who passed away recently, he was the most like emotionless, at least on the surface, person I knew.
yeah,
And by like emotions, I don't mean a bad way. I mean just very like logical. Like this happened, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
yeah,
I think that's part of his nature, but also part of the generation he grew up in.
mm,
And then he was like that towards my mum, and then so my mum is like very like, you know, and I think a lot of parents are like that because maybe before that, for my granddad's generation, it was a lot of what's what I'm looking for, a lot of coddling.
yeah,
So then he was like, nope, I want to be like harsh. Then that cycle continues,
yeah,
and
it
then
does.
you look at the politics now of like of what's being I guess pushed or who has a louder voice. It's the kind of the left wing ideologies of like you don't know how to make a decision for yourself. Let us do it for you.
Mm.
You don't know how to do this. Let us do it for you. We can handle all that for you,
Well, there's a whole
and
bunch
that's
of
what we're
people not,
experiencing now.
yeah, a whole bunch of people not thinking for themselves and wanting to be guided.
Yeah.
They're open to anything, and you could have a very powerful person, a narcissistic person that can take advantage of that frailty, and that appears to. So that's what's happened. That's why they've been so polarized over there. Um, so yeah,
Isn't it interesting as well, right? Like
mm,
that there's a natural inside of any hierarchy or any community. There's
mm,
always a self-correcting entity,
mm,
and like this might come off like a bit crazy, but that's why psychopaths exist. That's why they're 1 to 2% of the population.
mm,
That's why pathological narcissists also exist, who are, again 1 2% of the population.
yeah,
I don't mean your your definition of he's a narcissist or she's a narcissist. It's like no, I mean clinically diagnosable narcissism,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's self-correcting, right? And you see there's always someone that has to take out the trash, so to speak.
mm,
And I don't mean as in murder people. I mean specifically people who are willing to do like things where their emotions aren't, the empathy's not on.
mm,
Like it could be a variety of activities, but back in ancient culture, the people
yeah,
that were able to go off and fight other tribes
mm,
and be okay, like come back normal, like oh yeah, oh good, no worries,
mm.
because they have that switch turned off, that empathy neuron switch turned off.
They do.
And I'm
Yeah,
not saying that you do that now in this society. I'm saying there's examples of jobs in the world that need to be done
yeah,
where you can't be someone who has that switch on.
yeah,
And by switch, I don't mean that can be turned on and off. I mean switch as in just an example.
mm,
Like so. I think it's really important to note that yeah, that we are who we are individually, but we are a part of a bigger entity,
yes.
and
And we're
on
all
all levels.
yeah, and we're all
Go for it.
playing our roles in the um, what are they calling it these days? They think we're in a
Simulation.
simulation, right? So we're all going to playing our roles in the simulation, right? So, and you're right. There's certain people have certain personality traits that are perfect for their. If you're a surgeon, you don't want to be really upset about assaulting someone's body. You want to do it. That sort of stuff. If and we have
Precisely.
uh, further to your point around that pendulum is that if it's self-correcting, then you've got to trust that process too, right? So you go, okay, we'll lean this way, we'll lean back this way. These people will do their jobs, these people do those jobs, even if and I'm looking way from the outside here, if we end up having to kill half of the people in the world to learn a valuable lesson, we probably will. That's how it's going to be. But for me, in the time I'm here, and the only thing I have some control over, and probably not as much as I think, which is the way that I perceive the world and the way that I think. So if I recognize that I want to have a reasonable experience and existence between now and the day I die, I finally come to a point in my life where I think, okay, I'm no longer being an avatar. I'm no longer being someone that I needed to be for someone that I thought I should be for others. I'm being authentically me for the time I have left, and what am I going to do with that time? And if I notice myself being unsettled, or I notice myself being depressed or anxious or worried, that's the time to go, oh, hang on a sec. I think I'm probably a good enough father, brother, son, friend, businessman, counselor. I'm good enough at all of that, and I'm going to be moderate in all of my mistakes. I'm not going to be hugely anything. I'm not going to be hugely compassionate. I'm not going to be hugely angry. I'm just going to be somewhere in this middle ground that says I care enough, and that's enough, and I have boundaries around how much I'm willing to give of my time and care and compassion. And that's enough because I need to give myself time and compassion as well. So that's how it's working for me. And I think that's probably a pretty good goal for most, I think. And that is to be good enough at everything and to be moderate, not to be too much. And if you're a parent, to um, model that moderation, but also model that I can change. So if I've decided that way of being in the world no longer suits me, then I can change. I'd like my kids to see that because they're going to hit walls, they're going to hit challenges, they're going to have suffering, and if I can be a role model that said, "Oh, Dad went through that, but he ended up caring for himself more. He ended up loving himself throughout that process. He was kind to himself when that happened." I'd like them to watch that so they know they have that option. And once again, I'll make mistakes and I'll get things wrong and I'll say things wrong. And even though I'm sitting here telling you that I've got all this wisdom, I get it wrong all the time. And I apologise for that when I feel I have. But yeah, I'm enough, just enough moderation is good enough for me for the time I have left. And I think that's what I would like to impart or give other people the opportunity to do in this little career that I've chosen for the last 20 years of my life, or whatever it is, or the last 2 days of my life, depending on whether the media hits or I get hit by a bus, whatever it is. This is who I want to be. And that's working for me. And I'd like for people to watch that and see that there is an option. Yeah, I think that's what gets me up in the morning.
That's beautiful. I think that's a nice note to end on.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. I had a little bit of hesitation before, wondering what I was going to talk about, but clearly I had no trouble with that, did I? So.
No, it's great. What's the thing with these things, right? Because it is live. It's like, oh, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? And I felt that at the beginning, but you just flow with it. Like it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
Honestly, and again, it's just the same principle for life. People appreciate what is most real. I could polish this all up. I could be like, welcome, John, to like that. So what do you think about the X, Y, Z? It's like, well, my brain and my body will naturally go where it needs to go. It's just letting go and trusting, as you mentioned.
Let it go, trust it, make mistakes, be authentic, be human. The stand-up comedians have known that since many a time. It takes the rest of us time to realise that. Yeah, we can just be us, warts and all. Yeah.
That's it. Imperfectly perfect.
That's it. Perfect. Thank you so much.
No worries. So where should everyone go to find you?
And John Dimond, Counselling, in any spelling of that. You should find me online. And of course, Luke's been running all my social media so incredibly well. I'm getting more and more people following, which is wonderful. So anything with John Dimond, Counselling, you should be able to find me online in several places. And I see people both face to face and telehealth and online as well via Zoom for those that aren't on the Central Coast.
Beautiful. Thanks, John.
Okay, take care.